Awesome. All right. So, hey, everyone. My name is, as you said, and my name is Alex Riviere, and we're going to be talking about dependency injection in Vue.js. And I'm really excited because I went and I looked at the source code for Vue Formulate, and it totally does this. So this is going to be great. Like I'm totally going to be able to tie all of this in to everything that you just learned about. So let's let's get into this a little bit. So first off, quick thing about me. Who am I? I'm Alex Riviere. I'm a design engineer for NextTrack. We're a subsidiary of Michelin, and I am the co-organizer for the Atlanta Vue.js Meetup. And as he said, I do like cats and unicorns. So, uh, so we're going to talk about dependency injection, which is an advanced Vue.js concept. This is built into Vue.js. It is something that I obsess over for some reason. But just as a forewarning, if you are not familiar with Vue, if you are not totally like in depth, like brilliant with it, it may cause some confusion. It may cause a sense of wonder, and it also may cause a smug satisfaction that you know more than other people. So with all of that, we're going to back up a little bit before we get into dependency injection. So first, let's talk about methods of passing state between components in Vue. There are sort of four ways of doing it. You have props down, events up. We have Vuex using like a external store. We have using referencing either the parent or the root of an application or a component. And using provide and inject, which is dependency injection. So I'll sort of go through all of these, and then we'll start doing some examples of some stuff. So the sort of classic way of doing components is that you would do props down and then events up, right? So this is sort of classic traditional Vue component, like out of the gate what you're learning, right? You learn that you take data, you put it in a prop to get it into a component, and then if you want to get data out of a component, you emit it up. So it would be props in, and then you would emit data back up. Now, this is good. This is great. What's nice about it is that you have explicitly defined props and events, right? So you know what data you're passing in, you know what data you're getting out. It creates really good reusable components. It doesn't rely on outside data structures. You're not having to make like an external store or something. It's all sort of right there where you're using it, and it's easy to test, right? You put information in, you expect it to look some way, you expect information to come out, whatever, right? So this is standard. Like if you're going to make a module or an application, you're going to be using props and events all over the place. So the next one that we're going to talk about is using a global store. Specifically, I'm going to talk about Vuex. There's other options that you can make work with Vue, but pretty much the standard is use Vuex with Vue. The way that Vuex works, hopefully you're aware of this, is that from anywhere within your Vue application, you are able to get state to come in. And then by just sort of referencing that state, or you can use a getter to reference that state if you're needing to do something with it. And that state is reactive, so it'll update based on changes to that state. Then if you want to change that state, you would be able to do a mutation on that state. You would commit a mutation to that state. And so with this, we're not tied to passing props. We're not tied to, like the structure of our application, just sort of like willy-nilly, wherever you are, you can pull in some information, which is great. There are certain times that is fantastic, and that is exactly what you want to do. Global stores are good for large applications with shared state. If you have if you're using if you're making a storefront and you have a shopping cart, you want to be able to trigger like adding an item to a cart from the add to cart button, but then also you want to be able to reference that same cart in your cart drop down. And so that's the same data, but it's in two different places. It can be used along with props and emit. So you can bring some state in and then take that state and pass it in as a prop to another component. And so that component can be outside of the scope of it, right? So it's still useful in that way. Now, one of the challenges with using Vuex specifically is that it implicitly uses $store, and so it expects that $store is available to you, so that makes it more of an application type of thing. You're going to use this for applications, right? You're not going to build a component library that requires somebody to use Vuex. You're going to want something, if you're building a component library, you want it to be like you can drop it into whatever and just use it. So having Vuex as a dependency there makes it more challenging. So you're probably not going to be using Vuex in a component library. So implicit use of store makes that difficult. And it relies on an external dependency. Vuex is not part of the core like it doesn't come with Vue. When you npm install Vue, you don't have Vuex. You have to do an extra install to get that in there. So it's another library. And if you're trying to really like just make it nice and tight and small, then maybe having an extra dependency isn't the best option for you. So, and once again, it's not ideal for publishing modules. Relying on Vuex to be there, relying on $store to make your components work, unless you are doing something specifically with a store, it's not the best. So for publishing modules, Vuex isn't the best option. So the next thing we're going to talk about is $root. Now, $root is available in any Vue application. It refers to the root instance of your application, right? So you have this root instance where you may have some bit of data, right? So in our case, in this example, we have our walking tree component. That is the root of our application. And it has a bit of data. Now your raccoon component or your laser pew pew component may be able to refer to that bit of data. And this is great. This works perfectly. Until you take your walking tree component and all of your application and everything like that, and you stick it inside of another application, like you change around how things are working, suddenly that bit of data has changed where it is, right? They're looking at a higher level. So if it's suddenly inside of a Galaxy Guardians component, then you're not going to find it, right? Like it's a different structure at that point. So it's a bit fragile in that concern, but it's good for prototyping, right? I wouldn't use this in production necessarily, but it's good for prototyping and making quick examples of stuff if you just need to be able to access some state globally. Now, if you're wanting to make things more localized, there is $parent. Now, $parent refers directly to the parent component from where you are, right? So if you're in a component, $parent will look directly above it. And so you can get data from $parent by just doing $parent dot bit of data. So in this case, we have knowledge on our parent component. And so the child component can refer to $parent.knowledge and get that information. And similarly, a grandchild component that is inside of child component could do $parent.knowledge and get that same knowledge. And this is fine, once again, for prototyping, for doing something quick and dirty where you just want to demonstrate a concept or whatever. That's fine. This is great. I would not use this in production, however, unless there is some specific reason that you need to specifically touch the parent. And the reason for that is that if you change the structure of your application at all, this becomes extremely fragile. And stops working. So if you suddenly want to put a grandchild component inside of a parent component, the structure of it is all wrong. So that just makes everybody sad, and it isn't going to work very well. But this is where dependency injection in Vue comes in. So dependency injection in Vue is not traditional dependency injection, I have heard it said. I would disagree with that statement, but that's an argument for another day. We're not here to argue about that. So we're going to talk about provide and inject in Vue.js. So the way provide and inject works is that you have a component that will provide a value and another component that will inject that value. This allows us to do essentially the $parent lookup for some data without it breaking if you change the structure. So you can have it be as deeply nested as you want it to be without it, and it still can find that information. Now, the way that this specifically works is that there is a provide method that you can create on any component. Provide functions the same as the data method on a component. So you create a method, you return an object from that method. So with provide, you'd create a provide method and return an object from that method. Anything that you return from that method is what that component provides. And it lives on a property called _provided. And so in this case, our providing component has provided something called bit of data. I like to use bit of data because it can be anything. It can be an object, it can be a number, it can be a string, what have you. As long as you put it in an object, it is going to be the thing that you want. So for our injecting component to get this information, it is going to have a property called inject. And inject is written very similar to how props are written. It can be an array with strings. It can be an object with keys that then have more defined about what it's supposed to be. So for instance, you could, here I have, inject with an array and a string that says bit of data. I could also make this be inject that is an object that has bit of data as a key. And then it says that it is of type string and required true, right? Or it has a default or what have you. So inject works very similarly to how props work as far as definition. And so what Vue does in the background, specifically in Vue 2, is that the component that is injecting goes up the virtual DOM chain by looking at $parent _ provided. And it looks for a thing called bit of data in this case. And it doesn't find it there. So it goes to the next one. And it looks for _ provided .bit of data, doesn't find it, goes up to the next parent, and then it finds it, and then binds it to this .bit of data. So now you have it available to you in templates, you have it available to you in your component. Provide runs after data, props, everything is set up. Like it runs right before the created lifecycle hook. So it is like the last thing that happens. So by the time you get to provide things, you have all of this information. You have all of this stuff available. I forget exactly where inject runs, but I believe that it runs after props before data. I may be wrong about that, so don't quote me. But so this is how it works in Vue 2. In Vue 3, it's a little bit different. In Vue 3, when you provide data, every component has _ provided. And all of the information from the parent component gets put on that provided. So instead of having to go up 10,000 components in a parent tree to find the value that you're looking for, you only ever have to look up one parent because all of the information from their parent has already been transferred into it. So there you go. It works a little differently in Vue, but it functions exactly the same from a developer perspective. Yes. Okay. Show me how already. I get it. I'm taking a long time talking about concepts and stuff like that. Let's get into some code. So we have some simple components here. I'm going to do a simple provide component and a simple inject component. Now I'm going to use these nested right next to each other, but these could be as deeply nested as you want them to be. They don't have to be like done the way that I've defined them, but I'm doing a simple example so that you can sort of see what I'm talking about of how data gets transferred down. So in this case, we have a simple provide component, which has a template of that shows a count and a button that when you click it, it increments count, right? And we've defined our count as 1. So it starts off with the number 1 as the count. And then we provide, see, here's our provide function. We return an object that has count, and we bind that to the value of this.count, right? So pretty straightforward. I think people can follow that. If you have questions, do throw them in the chat. I am keeping an eye on that. And so our next one is our inject component, where we're going to inject this value that's been provided. And so the template is the same, right? We have this dot, this is the injected count. We display the count, right? And then we have we just inject count, right? That's all we're doing. It's very simple. It's very, very, you wouldn't actually use this anywhere, but it's a good demonstration. So cool. All right. Pretty straightforward. So here it is in actually working. We have our simple provide component here. And inside of its slot, we have a simple inject, right? So over here where it's displayed, we have, this is the count 1, that's displaying our count. And then here's the injected count, right? So there it is. So outer component, inner component. This could, once again, this could be as deeply nested as it needs to be. Now, when I click the increment button, we expect that the count So, thing you should note, oh, that's exciting. My internet connection is unstable. Thing you should note, and tell me if I drop out because I will not know, is that that provide and inject is not reactive by default in Vue 2. In Vue 3, with the change in the reactivity system, this has changed a little bit. But in Vue 2, it is not reactive by default. You are passing the value of that thing. Cool, thank you. You are passing the value of that thing when it happens. So it's not going to be reactive. Now there's some cases where if you like pass an object, then the object is reactive still. So it's but we're not, that gets messy. So for safety and for being in Vue 2, we're going to make this reactive. Now I know that you're going to ask me, how do we make this reactive, right? How do we create this to be reactive? How do we make this be like observable? You want this to be something that you can like observe and then maybe like chain or pipe something off of, right? So I know that there's some of you out there who might be saying like, hey, we should use RxJS. And my answer is no, we don't need to use RxJS. We can do this just with Vue, because that's the beauty of this system. You don't need another library. You just need the Vue system. So let's make this reactive now. Now we're going to use a trick of the Vue reactivity system in Vue 2, where it looks at what function is calling the value and then remembers that, and when the value changes, calls that function again, right? Bear with me. So we're going to make a different simple example. This is sort of the default standard example of using a V model. You have the value of the data piece, and then you have V model bound to it, right? So when you update the input, it updates the text. This is like Vue 101. Hopefully all of you have seen this before. Over in our script section, we have our text data, which starts off as hello world. And then in our provide section, we're going to return an object with 2 functions. So the first function is get text, which returns the current value of text. And then we're going to set text, which updates the current value of text. Now, since these are scoped, since these are anonymous functions and they are arrow functions, this is already bound to the current instance of this component. So it will update when it is called, right? So this is how we're going to trick the Vue reactivity system into giving us a reactive value that we can update. So now here's where we inject it. So in this one, once again, the exact same as our parent provide component, we have our text, and then we have a V model with our text. Now, remember, we provided a get method and a set method. So we're going to inject those two things. We're going to inject get text and set text. And then we're going to make a complex computed value that has a getter and a setter. And they're just going to call their respective function that they need to. So there we go. So now we have a reactive computed value that we can use inside of our template to V-model onto something. So here is that. Once again, I'm using reactive provide and reactive inject. Reactive inject could be as deeply nested as it needs to be or wants to be inside of reactive provide, and this would still work. I'm just doing it this way because time. So now when we look at this example, sorry, my slides are being weird. I can start typing things in. And it will show up everywhere, right? And similarly, if I go into our injected component, I can mess it up. So there we go. So now we have a reactive injected value. So there we go. Now we can tie into the Vue reactivity system and update things on the fly. This is great. Okay, cool. Now, all of this has been Vue 2 up to this point. I've been talking about Vue 2. The reactivity model in Vue 3 has changed things for the better. There is a new way of doing things in Vue 3 called Composition API. Hopefully you have all heard about Composition API at this point. I'm not going to go into it too much. Just know it's a different way of doing things, but we'll discuss this. So in Vue 2 and 3, our reactive provide method, this works. What we're doing here works. This is not going to change. This still works. In fact, I wrote this example in Vue 2 and then changed to Vue 3 and made it, updated the couple of things that I needed to. And this example started working immediately. So this works. Don't need to worry about it. With our Vue 3 composition API, we can make it with less code on our end. With the Vue 3 composition API, we declare a ref that we assign to text, right? And then we call provide and say provide text with this reactive value. And then we return text, and now it can be used in our template. For the reactive inject, same thing. You can use how we were doing it before. But you can also call inject text, get the value of text, and pass it in so that we can use it in our template. If you do it this way, text is reactive by default, even though it's a string. So you can V-model it. You don't have to make a getter. You don't have to make a setter. It just works. So this is an improvement, in my opinion, especially if you are doing a bunch of stuff with this. Now, I mentioned that we've been talking about this. I've shown you a couple of examples, and so with Vue 2, to make things more helpful, there are a couple of different packages that you can install to make this more helpful, or to make this a little bit easier. Thorsten Lundborg has made Vue Reactive Provide, which is a way to create reactive provided values and injected values so that they're easier to use. His is really good. I made a package called Convexed because it mimics the React context API, and I kind of had to put the V somewhere because it's a Vue thing. And I would not use it in production at all. It is very alpha, but I will accept ideas and submissions for it, and that works. So the last thing that we're going to do, because I know this has been a lot, like I think I'm doing good. If anybody, seriously, if I am going too fast and anybody needs me to slow down, let me know. But I think this next part is going to really like hammer it home, hopefully. So where should you use this? Where should I use this? Generally speaking, my answer is you shouldn't, which I know is weird. You just sat through 24 minutes of me like extolling the value of being able to do this. My answer is typically not. Typically don't use this. This is not something that you should use all the time. There are instances where you do want to use this though. When you are expecting data to be there that other components are going to provide, and you are making a library such as Vue Formulate that we just heard about, they use provide and inject to allow the inputs to register with a form. So when you listen for validations on your form, it's because the validations are written on the input, but register themselves and unregister themselves from the form. So those are tightly coupled, and like it's a compound component, right? Where you don't expect to use this component outside of another thing. You can in case of Vue Formulate, but you don't have to. And so what we're going to do though is that to sort of really drive this home and make sure that you really get it, is we're going to make an accordion now. We're going to switch over to demo in a second, but I want to say I stole this from Cassidy Williams with her permission. I asked, she said, go for it. And she does this in React, and she has a whole workshop about React hooks and stuff like that. And this is one section of that. And she did this, and I was like, I have this identical talk, but for Vue, and we talked about it. But I love her example. I had a different example. So y'all are the first ones who really get to see this. So we're gonna do this. So I'm going to switch over, and we're going to look at some code examples. So, but yeah, you should follow Cassidy because she's great and hilarious and super smart, and is super awesome and makes great content. So we're going to switch windows because I am on the wrong window. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm going to get back over here though. Here we go. There we go. Now I can see everything. All right. So we're going to talk about this. We have an accordion. Now, if you've never made an accordion, we'll go over sort of the basics of it. With an accordion, you typically have some form of title, header, button, panel thing that you click on. When you click on it, a description displays. When you click on another panel within that accordion, any that are open will close, and that one that you have clicked will open. Cool. So this one works, right? We just click around, it'll open up. So let's look at this code a little bit. Now, right now I have sections as data, but we could imagine it as a prop, right? A prop called sections, and it gets passed in an array of objects. This does not demonstrate that. It is in data at the moment, but imagine if you will, it is a prop. So in our template, I have a div that's sort of the wrapper for the accordion, right? Because you have to have one thing. We have a section with a v-for. So we go through each section in our sections of that we get from our prop. And then we have a title. And when you click on the title, we set active index to the current index that we're on. And then we have content that displays when we're on the active index, right? An active index is a little bit of data over here. Now, this is fine. This works good. This is perfectly acceptable until Sue from design comes in and she says, we really want to be able to make the accordion have the text above or below. Cool. So now we add a prop, right? We add a prop to the component and we say, okay, set the text above, right? So text above, and have it default to false. So if text above is false, when we have this data panel content div down here, we do a VF up here, and then like, do we check it in both places? And there we go. Okay, we're good. And then they come in and they say, well, actually, we really want to be able to do like, we want to be able to disable something, right? But we only want to be able to disable one. Okay, well, now we're going to add a VF on our section to be able to like disable that section, and then you pass that in as part of the sections prop. Okay, cool, good. That's easy enough. And then they say, we really want to be able to style each of the divs individually. So each title gets its own color, and then like the background becomes its own color. So now you're adding more information into your section thing, and you have to have a default, and you have to do a lookup, and you have to do all of this. And then they go, well, okay, so some of them we want to have titles, and some of them we don't want to have a description, though. We just want the title. We don't want the description. So now you have to figure out how to not show the description if there's not a description. There's an easier way of doing this. Let's do it this way. We're going to split this up into 4 components that all talk to each other, because realistically, we need to use slots for a lot of this. This wrapper component doesn't care what's inside of it. It needs to track one thing, right? It needs to track what the active index is. And then each section needs to know where it is within the thing, so it has an identifier so that it can set the active index, but it doesn't care about anything else. Now we can have a bunch of props, we can pass a bunch of props around, but we're going to use provide and inject because that's going to make this simple to use later. So let's look at our accordion component first. So we have an accordion component. This is sort of the wrapper for the whole thing, right? It's that root component. So this has a div and a slot. That's your template. Done. Now I'm using data attributes on these so that we can style it based off of that. And the reason for that is that a data attribute, when used in CSS, is not as specific as a class. So if you were to apply a class to this, you could override the styles lickety-split. You're not having to do some weird class selector. You can just override it. The next thing that we're going to do is that, like I said, this outer wrapper really only needs to keep track of what is currently active. So we are going to have our active index. We're going to set it to 0. And we are going to provide an object that has our setter and our getter. Now, as I explained before, in Vue 3, you do not need to do this part. You can do a setup function, have a bit of data, provide it, and then return it. You're good to go. So that's it. This is our wrapper container. It's going to track the active index. That's the only thing that it cares about. The next one that we're going to do is a section. So each section of the accordion has a title and a description inside of it, or should have a title and description inside of it, or should have something inside of it. We don't know. So our section needs to define the current index, the current place, have a unique identifier so that when we set the active index, it knows, it can go back and check, am I that active index, right? Am I that index? So I'm going to do some JavaScript voodoo here. I'm going to define a variable outside of our component. this variable is scoped at the module level. Now, I'm not going to get super complex into detailed like I'm not going to get into like super complex detailed like explanations of scope and module scope and function scope and all sorts of stuff like that. Just know there is a variable inside this module. Every time that you use this component, this value, this section index, is the same across all of those, right? So every instance of the component, this section index is the same. It's identical. We're going to abuse that a little bit. Now, like I said, provide is a method. So we can do things inside of it. We can do logic inside of it. You shouldn't, but we can. So we're going to, because we're terrible people. So what we're going to do is that we're going to increment our section index. So it starts off at -1. We increment it once, so now it is 0 for the first time that we use this. And then we're going to bind it to a value called index. Now, you'll notice I'm not using a function here. You don't want to use a function here because remember how I said that section index is the same across all instances. So I just want the value of it at this moment. And that is how you do it, is that you just say, this now equals the current value, and index that this section provides will always be the same. We're also adding in a prop called disabled. So if I want to disable a specific one, we can, and we're going to provide that value down. It's a Boolean, it's default to false, problem solved. Cool. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet, but this will get really good in a second. So the next thing that we're going to look at is the title. So with the title, we're going to have a panel title, and it's going to have some classes applied to it because we need to tell if it's disabled and show a disabled state. We need to tell if it's expanded or not because we need to change a little plus to a minus, right? Like it's going to change, that's going to change a little bit. And it's going to have a click handler. Now, I know this is a div and I know it has a click handler. I am aware of that. I recognize this is inaccessible. Don't do this. If this is in your production code base, and you don't have all the necessary stuff to turn it into an actual button, don't do this. Use a button. For the purposes of this demo, we're using a div. So that being said, don't do this in production. So this div has a click handler of activate. And then we have a slot, right? So we can put whatever content we want to into that slot. We're going to inject 4 things. We're going to inject the index, which comes from our accordion, or no, comes from our section, right? The index is coming from the section. We have set active index and get active index. Those are coming from the accordion wrapper, right? The top component. And then we have get disabled, which comes from our section again, right? So we can tell if it's disabled or not. We're going to make a couple of computed values here. We have is active, which returns if this dot index, right, our index from our section, so what section we're in, is equal to this dot get active index. So we're looking to see if our static value matches the dynamic value, right? So if get active index changes, this computed value updates. Same thing with classes. We're going to look at if this is disabled or not, and then return a disabled class. Otherwise, we're going to look and see if it is active, and if it is, make sure it's expanded. And that changes our style from a plus to a minus or what have you. And then we have one method, which is our click handler, activate. So if this is not disabled, so if it's disabled, we just ignore this. We're going to, so if it's not disabled, we want to set the active index to our index, right? So that, boom, it opens up. So that's the title. Last one, here we go, content. So our content is a div with classes and a slot. And for this one, we only need to look at index and get active index. We don't care about disabled here. We probably should care about disabled here, but we don't. And we make our isActive computed value, and we make our classes computed value that if it's active, we give it a class of expanded. And if it is not active, we don't give it a class. There we go. If it's active, it expands. If it's not active, it closes. All right. So now that we've done that, here it is in action. I'm going to get rid of all of these because I demonstrated this to someone a little bit earlier. But we now have this as so our JavaScript looks like this. Basically, we have a components section where we add in all of our components. We have our sections again. And we're going to now use our wrapper to wrap the whole thing. We have a section with a v4 so that we can do sections in section. And it has a key. And then we're going to do a span with our label and our icon. And then we display our content inside of the content one. And when you click on the title, it updates everything accordingly. So this is using provide and inject. So this is somewhere that you would use it. A lot of the component libraries that you use are using provide and inject behind the scenes. Yeah, so that is sort of that. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, you can ask now. Also, I am available on Twitter. Feel free to DM me, message me, yell at me, whatever, take the good with the bad. I'm also over in the Vue.js Berlin Discord. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.